the most terrifying aspect of the job process. Am I right? Okay, you heard me say right at the beginning. Interviews, you're going to be nervous, that's okay. What I'm going to talk to you today about is some of the tips and tricks that you can use, the simple things in interviews that can help get through some of the issues. Okay, so let's I said to you at the beginning, treat the job application as a job in itself. If you treat it seriously, if you put the effort in, you are demonstrating to the employer the same sorts of skills that they're actually going to want to see, right? There's no point in saying to an employer, if you hire me, I'm going to work hard. Show them that you're going to work hard to get the job. Demonstrate the skill, right? Similarly, there's no point in saying to an employer, I'm honest and hardworking. If you're not both of those things, why the hell? Goodness gracious. All right. If you have not spent a minimum of 4 hours, and preferably 8, on a single job application going into that interview, you have not spent enough time. You should be thoroughly researching the company, researching the person that who's going to be interviewing you, researching the market that the company works in, researching their products or their services or whatever it is. Have a thorough understanding of what job you are actually going for. And one of the tips that I would always say is, look your interviewer up on LinkedIn, from your LinkedIn profile when you're logged in, so that they can see that you have looked them up. Because it then, this person's taken the trouble. How many of you looked up your interviewer who's going to interview you today? Good on you, William. Good on you. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. 3. You 3, you just got your jobs. Right. Now, before you get the interview, there's often going to be a phone call. You put in your application. Are you going to make a phone call to ask about it? Now, look, I just thought I'd give you a quick tip on this one. The answer is generally yes, but it's something that you do with a great deal of caution. You do it understanding who are you applying to. For instance, Wahib's up the back of the room. Your opinion, Wahib, do you like it when a candidate calls you?
Yeah.
Right. Wahib, as a professional recruiter, is going to be extremely busy, yet he still wants to hear from you. So when you call him up, you're going to say to him the first thing, hi, I'm whatever candidate, I've applied for this position. Do you have a couple of minutes to chat? And if he says no, you say, okay, is there a better time for me to call? If he says, I'll get back to you, that's what you take on board, right? If he says, call me then, you call me then. Now, when you call, of course, if it isn't working, you don't pester. Neve asked me a question. There you are, Neve. Neve asked me a question earlier today. She applied for a graduate position in a large company that has an HR section, all that sort of stuff. She called twice to follow up, hadn't made any progress. My recommendation to her is stop. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, stop. Don't pester. Right? But this is a great chance. I mean, Helena was saying, what are we looking for? We're looking for communications. The ability to pick up the phone and demonstrate your communications is obviously immensely valuable. But of course, if you're going to call about a job, you better bloody well be ready for that call. You better have done your research. So for instance, in every single one of my job applications, I put in the phrase, AAS experience preferred. Now, why do I do that? I don't give a rat's ass if you know AAS or not. I can teach you that in a day. The reason I put it in is because all of you graduates who are going to pick up the phone and call me and say, and I'm going to say to them, do you have AAS experience? And I say, well, no, I don't have any actual experience, but I learned about it at university, right? How many of you would have said that? Good many, right? And our first question I'm going to say to you is, great, tell me how it works. And 95% of those graduates are going to say to me, I have to go back and look at my books. Well, that's not good enough. You've just blown your call right then and there. Because I expect you to be prepared. Have notes, especially if you're nervous. Right? They can't even see that you've got notes in front of you, but have your notes. Be ready for the call. Stand up. It makes you sound more dynamic. Right? And if eliminate all distractions. Do not have your bloody mobile phone anywhere near you, anywhere in the recruitment process. Not in the job interview, not in the call. Do not fall prey to the stereotype of the millennial who can't tear themselves away from their phone. If you like what you're hearing, say so. An employer wants to hear the enthusiasm. They want to know that you want this job. That if they make the investment in you of the $30,000+, and Blake's quite right that I was being a little bit conservative, right? If they're going to make that investment, they want to know that you're going to pay back that investment, that you want this job, that you're going to stay in this job long enough that you're going to stick with it and pay back that investment. So you want to say right from the get-go, if you love what you're hearing, for God's sake, say so. Say so. Make notes afterwards and use them for your research. Now, the best candidate who ever applied for a job with me, he called me up. He said, Mr. Sammut, Christ, my father's here. He says, Mr. Sammut, he says, I'm really interested in this job. He says, I'd like to ask you a few questions. And he asked me some technical questions about the job. Thank you very much, Mr. Sammut. We finished the call here. All well and good so far, not run-of-the-mill stuff. 3 days later, he called me back. He said, Mr. Sammut, he said, I was really eager after your phone call. He said, I made a bunch of notes, I went to the library, I did some research, and now I would like to ask you these questions. He had that job before he ever walked through the door. Why? Because he had demonstrated all of the key things that I needed to see in a candidate. I wanted a researcher. I wanted somebody who was interested in my job. What did he do? He was interested in my job and he went out and did research. He had the job before he walked through the door. I mean, you know, yeah, fine, I interviewed him, but my mind was made up, right? So preparing for your interview. Your interview is your best chance to distinguish yourself from the other candidates. So you're going to do your research. You're going to use your networks. I'm going to pick on you again, Neve. Now, so Neve was going for a job recently. She called me up because she's a part of the RACI. She's active in the RACI, and we at the RACI and Professionals Australia are here to help you. Right? Andrew used your career services, right? We're here to help you. She called me up, and what did we do? We researched the job, the company. We said, who in our network do we know who knows about that company, that job? Right? We went out and found about as much as we could. And it turns out that I personally had a relationship with the outgoing director of the company. Unfortunately, he didn't get back to us quite in time, did he? But it was worth a try. Right? And the point is, it could have made a difference. If he got back to me a little bit, you know, to say, for me as a personal recommendation, to say, I've got this young, eager person who really wants to work for your company, I think you should take a close look at her. What's he going to do? He's going to tell the person doing the thing, pay particular attention to this candidate because they come with a good recommendation. Right? So use your networks, and your networks, yes, it's everyone around you, right? It's your academics, it's your friends and family, it's your professional associations. This is why you're networking with your professional association. Not so that you can go to some contact, so not so that you can come to me and say, Dave, do you have a job for me? No, I don't have a job for you. I'm a little tiny company, but I know a lot of people. And it's who I know and who they know. And even if I don't know, where's William? Right? William came to me the other day, and he said, I want to get started in my career. First thing I said, William, let's connect you with. And I gave 4 recommendations. These are the people that you need to talk to who are movers and shakers in the areas that you are interested in. Right? And I made 4 introductions, and all 4 of them responded positively. Right, William?
Yes.
Now, not one of them is going to employ him, but every single one of them is going to help steer him right. You know, oops, sorry. Hang on. Yep. Google the person who's going to interview you. Look at them in India. Have a familiarity. What was their career path? How did they get there? Right? It's a stereotype that men love to talk about themselves. I would broaden that to people love to talk about themselves. If you go into that interview and you're saying, I've looked you up, I'd like to hear your impression, you know. When it comes question time, you get a chance to ask some intelligent question based on your knowledge of them and their company. How much is that going to distinguish you from all of the other candidates, right? Prepare notes. Now, when we come to the Q&A session, I'm actually going to ask the various mentors what they're thinking of this. But as a recruiter, when I was working in recruitment consulting, I had absolutely no problem with a candidate walking in with a book of notes in front of them and saying, I've prepared for this interview. These are my research that I've done on this. These are my questions that I've prepared for the thing. I don't expect when you come into my job that you're going to have everything that you need to know in your head. So why would I expect that you have it in the interview? On the contrary, what I see when I see a candidate sitting across from me with a barrel of notes is here's somebody who's thorough, who's meticulous, who's prepared, who's systematic. Are they not central facets of the scientific method? You know, if you want to be a scientist, approach this scientifically. And of course, the fundamental advice, if the difference, okay, if a graduate salary is $60,000, and if the difference between having a really good application and having a not good application is 6 months of unemployment, that's $30,000 difference to you. Now, would you spend a day of your life to earn $30,000? Hands up anyone who would say no. Right, no models in this room. Right? You've got to think about it in those terms. A few good applications, a little bit of hard work now will set you right. And it ends up being less work anyway. Right? So, some basic interview protocols. A good handshake. Now, I'm going to be sexist here. I think it's become pretty apparent that I give pretty straight down the line advice. Women don't tend to get as much experience with handshakes, so practice. Right? You want to give a good handshake and not a little wet fish one, right? Men, if you're nervous, for God's sake, go dry your hands. All right? Turn up early. As I said before, turn up early. Never, ever, ever be late for an interview. Never, ever, ever be early for an interview. Wait outside somewhere where you're not their problem and then turn up 2 to 3 minutes ahead. Go, use the time to calm yourself. Go in there prepared. Be polite to the person at the front desk. I shouldn't have to say this, but astoundingly, I do. Every time I do an interview, even if I don't have a receptionist or PA at the time, I will put someone at the front desk so that the interviewee coming in will speak, and I'm then going to go ask them and say, how did they interact with you? Right? Because I need to see how you're interacting with everybody. Did you hear that famous, that great one that was in the paper the other day? Some guy stole a car spot because he was running late for his interview and flipped off the guy whose space it was that he was stealing. Went inside and it turned out that was the guy who was interviewing. Awesome. All right, gentlemen, personal hygiene. Okay, don't stink. Ladies, I do not want to see your décolletage. If you dress in any way inappropriately, you are going to make me uncomfortable. I'm not looking for a mistress, I'm looking for an employee. Okay? You do not want me sitting in an interview being uncomfortable. Particularly because I'm a scientist and a nerd, right? As a scientist and a nerd, I have trouble keeping eye contact. If I look away and I look down and the first thing I'm going to see is your décolletage, it's awkward for everyone. Yeah, be polite to the receptionist. Okay, general tips. Be energetic, be happy, be enthusiastic. Why? Because that's what's expected of you. You're young. That's the only characteristics that we can expect of you. Never, ever get aggressive in an interview. Who's an alpha in this room? Let's see. Not you. How about you, young man? No? An alpha male, right? Look, Daniel, you're pretty self-possessed. So Daniel's my mentee. But Daniel's pretty self-possessed. He's not one who gets flustered easily. But because he maintains that good, direct view, there's always the risk that an employer is going to look at him and say, he's my alpha, right? And when I interview a candidate, what I'm looking for is the real person, right? So if you're incredibly nervous, I'm going to treat you with kid gloves. I'm going to try and see past the nerves, because if you've worked for me for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you're not going to be nervous anymore. I want to see who the person is who's going to work for me. But if you're that alpha, if you're that guy that I see as potential risk of causing runctions I'm deliberately going to piss you off in the interview just to see how you handle it. And you must never, ever rise to the bait. You might just think it's because I'm a difficult person. Well, I am, but I'm also doing it because I'm testing you. Okay? Try to talk open if you can. Try to get past the interview mindset. The person wants to see who you are, for better or for worse. And that might mean you miss out on one job, but it also means you'll capture the job that you really want, right? Because that will shine through. You'll miss out on the job that you never really wanted, but you will get the job that you really do want, the one that's a better fit. Silence can be interpreted as either inability or hostility. So don't be wary of being too passive in the interview, right? I know that that can be difficult, and you say, how do I maintain the thing? Just be prepared to talk. Be prepared when a person asks you a question that you're trying to give a full answer without babbling. My problem is I babble. Finding a balance, right? Groveling and overconfidence are two ends of the spectrum, both of which are bad. I will give you an example. I once went for an interview, Wahid will love this, and the interviewer said to me, I said to him, I'm not available until this date. And I said, but I'm worth waiting for. And completely deadpan, he looked at me and said, that remains to be seen. Would you believe I didn't get that job? Remember that this is a business transaction. You're there to talk business. Put yourself in a business frame of mind, okay? And body language, sit up, lean a little bit forward, maintain your eye contact. Without the creepy stalker, eye contact, right? Some little tips. Accept a drink. Why do you accept a drink? You're going to come in, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to offer you a tea, a coffee, or water, right? And you accept a drink for two reasons. Number one, it is a universal mark of hospitality. It establishes a small bond between you and the interviewer. And secondly, and far more importantly, it's your crutch. You get asked a difficult question. You've just had 3, 4, 5 seconds of thinking time that haven't been filled with. It's a little tip that it actually genuinely helps. Okay? Be prepared to answer questions about your behaviour. We work off a principle in recruitment called behavioural-based interviewing. Okay? The best predictor of future behaviour is past behaviour, and you've heard me talk about in the examples that we talked about here. I've said what this person did and what that told me about their behaviour, right? So you're going to be asked questions about, tell me about a problem, a time when you had a problem with somebody. How did you resolve it, right? You're going to be asked questions like, why did you like your degree? What did you like about your degree and why? You're asked open-ended questions. Now, you've got to be able to be prepared to answer more than yes and no. And the technique that's often used is called STAR. Situation, task, action, result. You want to have your STAR stories. Going into your interview, you want to think about some of your STAR stories. When was a time that you confronted something difficult? When was a time that you worked past a problem? When was a time that you achieved something great? And you build your STAR story around these and have them in your notes, ready to go, right? I, as an interviewer, and tell me, our mentors here, hands up anyone who would have a problem when you ask this sort of question. If a person said, I've prepared for this sort of question, I'd like to tell you about this. Not one of you would have a problem, would you? Right? Because there's nothing wrong with preparation. So, you're allowed to cheat. You're allowed to cheat in your exam, right? Two of my favourite questions that I love to ask is, tell me something about yourself that I cannot learn by reading a resume. I've read your resume. When you walk into the interview and the first question I ask you is, tell me about yourself, and you just list your resume, you're wasting my time and yours. Because I already read your resume. Tell me about you. Daniel, you're my mentee. Tell me something about yourself that I cannot learn by reading your resume. You're supposed to prep. Sorry? You're supposed to prep. You've had a year to prep. Come on.
The industry that I'm looking to go into was something that I basically had no experience in prior to me getting my first job in it. However, what I've learned since then has pushed me far above almost everyone else of the same level that I'm at.
Outstanding. Great. I have 100 resumes in front of me. What makes you different? And most people are going to give me the same answers. I'm hardworking, I'm loyal. What's the other one? Team player. Usual rubbish answers. The funny thing about an answer to this question is, I don't care what you answer. I only care that you give me an interesting answer. And every single one of you should think about this question. What is it that makes you special? What is it that makes you different? What is it that gives you that advantage? You should be thinking about it from the perspective that the thing that gives you advantage and the thing that you love is the thing that you should be going for. And you should be able to go into the interview prepped to answer this question. Even though you're not going to get answered, you can find a way of introducing it yourself. This is what I think makes me special. I mean, the thing is, we are trained from the young stage not to blow our own trumpet, right? When you go into an interview, you are your own horn section. This is the one time in your life where you need to stand up and say, I'm great! In the nicest possible way, right? So yeah, I mean, what makes you special? For me, I'll tell you what makes me special. Two things. Number one, I am prolific in my output. And I'll give you an example. What? Do you hear? I'll give you an example. When I say that to employees, no point in saying I'm prolific. You have to be able to back it. So at one point I was managing a laboratory. I had 4 staff working under me, and the laboratory was an operating lab for a manufacturing site. When the new lab manager took over, he had to work 50% more hours and employ 2 extra staff just to do what I was already doing. The difference was me. Okay? He was a great bloke, nothing wrong with him. But that's the example, right? I can prove that I was prolific, right? Do I have excellent communication? For me, the other aspect is that I think strategically. I don't just think about the fire that I'm fighting today, I think about the fires that are going to be lit 6 months from now. And again, I think it was an example. Back in 1999, wow, am I old. The Protection of the Environment Operations Act changed, an environmental piece of legislation. And my boss came running into my office one day and he said, Dave, he says, I've just heard about this change in the regulations. I said, don't worry about it. I said, the first document you needed was in your inbox two weeks ago, the second one was in your inbox this morning, and the last will be in your inbox before the day is out. Right? I was prepared for what was coming. When that piece of legislation came in, we were the first company to get an approval under the new piece of legislation. BHP came to me afterwards and said, how did you manage it? That's my star story, right? An interview is a two-way street. You need to actively listen and respond to. Where's Kirsty? There's Kirsty. So Kirsty is great. When I speak to Kirsty as my other mentee, and we have our stuff, she actively responds to the points that I'm making, right? That's great in an interview. My tip for Kirsty was that she's doing it too often and that she could count to 3. And every third one, that's when she responds, right? Now that may be true, may not be true, but Kirsty's great for that aspect, right? The employer wants you to ask questions. They want to know that you care enough about this job, right? And again, you can go into the interview with your questions already written down, right? Now, interestingly, the DCS Technical on Facebook and my own webpage and on LinkedIn, I post regularly jobs advice, and the most recent one was about what questions should you ask in an interview. No, do it for me. Whoa, shit. So ask yourself, what are some good questions? What do you like best about working here? This one. What are the common attributes of your top performers? What do I have to do really well in this job? Why is it a great question? Because it already shows that you're putting yourself in the mindset of being in that job. I want this job so much. I'm already thinking like I've already got it. And I want to show, and I'm already thinking about how am I going to do it really well, right? What are the two or three things that really drive success for this company? They're really good questions to ask. There's more of that in the job interview. I'm going to wrap it up. Closing the interview. If you're interested in the position, say so. There's nothing wrong with enthusiasm at this point, right? Thank the interview for their time. Follow up. Send a thank you note. The old world politeness is a good thing, and it's too rare. Okay? All right. Good luck. Finding a job. Yeah, Leo, you can have your spin. Finding a job is supposed to be hard work, but if you do your research, if you do it well, you can quickly find great work. As I said, I've never been unemployed for longer than 3 weeks, and I'm not great. It's just because I know what I'm doing. Okay? All right, quick questions before we launch into interviews. Leo.
I've got one thing. It's a question about the job application. Did you all read it very closely? What was in there that was really important? You were going to be travelling to visit customers. What's number one in my mind when I'm interviewing you? How are you going to interface with my customers representing my company? So read the job application, read it deeply. Because there's a big hit in that job application that's going to be important to me. How are you going to represent my company to our customers?
Very well said, Leo. Now, we haven't talked much about analysing the job ad and how to prepare that first application. We haven't had time today. But I will say, in the Understanding the Job Market video series, we go into that in a great deal of detail. Right? Everything we've talked about today, we talked about in a lot more detail. It is definitely worth 2.5 hours of your time. Okay? I understand it's long and boring and it's, you know, some balding old fart, but it is worth your time. It will genuinely help. Okay? All right, let's launch into